You know the words. The most beautiful sight you'll see is the holly that will be on your own front door. This is the inspiration behind the holiday welcome quilt pattern. The twinkling stars and welcoming wreaths are meant to give the feeling of home for the holidays. This is the throw size quilt, and this is the fun door banner size. The pattern includes instructions for 5 different sizes. For today's tutorial, I'm going to be walking you through this door banner. It's a fun pattern that goes together really quickly. It just includes one block of each of these 2 blocks. So it goes together really quickly, and it's a fun, quick DIY that'll get you in the mood for Christmas. So stay tuned. These are my pieces cut and ready to go. I'm using Christmas fabrics from my stash. Most of them are Joann keepsake cottons. There are 2 different options for cutting the diamond shapes. In the first method, you use a regular quilting ruler that has a 45-degree marking. Line up the 45-degree line with the bottom of the fabric strip and cut along the edge of the ruler. Measure 2.5 inches and cut again, keeping the 45-degree line on the edge of the fabric strip. The other method is to cut the diamonds using a template. You can buy an acrylic diamond template on shadowvalleyquilts.com. This quilt uses the diamond template for a 6-inch Lemoyne Star quilt block. Line up the template with your fabric strip and cut along the edges. You can trim the points for less bulk in the seams if you choose. Cut the square A and square B pieces in half diagonally to form the triangle A and triangle B pieces. To create the star block, we're going to work with one color diamond at a time. Line up the long edge of triangle A with the edge of the diamond. Match the points and let the other triangle point overhang the diamond. Sew in place and then press the seam as it is to set it. Then press the seam allowance open. Repeat with all 4 diamonds. Then attach triangle B. Line up the straight sides and let the point of the triangle overhang the diamond. Sew in place and press as before. Repeat to create 4 triangle units. Repeat this process with the other color diamond with one important difference. We're going to be creating a mirror image triangle unit with this color combination. So we'll attach triangle A to the opposite side of the diamond. Attach triangle B, completing the triangle unit. We'll need 4 triangle units of each color combination to create the star block. Take one of each color and line them up along their long sides, matching the seams and lining up the points. Pin and sew, creating a square. Press the seam allowances open. Trim the squares to size. Sew 2 squares together, matching and pinning the seams and pressing the seams open. Line up the 2 rectangles, carefully matching and pinning the seams. Sew and press the seam allowance open. Now we'll add the borders to our star. Sew 2 fabric 1 border strips to the sides of the star block and press the seam allowances toward the borders. Sew 2 fabric 3 squares to the ends of the other 2 border strips and sew the resulting strip square combos to the top and bottom of the star block. Repeat the process with the outer border strips and corner squares. And we have a finished star block. We only need 1 star block for the door banner that we're making today. So for a larger quilt, you'll make multiple of those stars. The wreath block is basically a 9-patch block. We're going to start with the corner squares. First, we'll make 8 at a time half square triangles. This works well because we need exactly 8 matching HSTs for each wreath block. Place a fabric 1 and fabric 5 square right sides together. Mark 2 diagonal lines from corner to corner. Then sew a 1/4 inch away from each line on both sides of the line. Cut on the marked lines, forming 4 triangles, then cut each triangle in half through the center, forming 8 half square triangles. Press the seam allowances open or toward the darkest side and trim all of the HSTs to size. To assemble each corner square, use 2 HSTs, 1 fabric 1 square, and 1 fabric 5 square. Sew them together into rows first, pressing away from the HSTs. Then, sew these 2 units together, nesting the seams to create a corner square. We'll need 4 corner squares. Now we'll move on to the top center square. This is an hourglass block. So place a fabric 1 and 3 square right sides together. Mark a diagonal line from corner to corner. Sew a 1/4 inch away from the line on both sides of the line and cut on the line. Press the seam allowances toward fabric 1. Now, line up these 2 squares, these 2 HSTs, with the seams nested and the fabrics alternating. Mark a diagonal line from corner to corner, perpendicular to the seams. Sew a 1/4 inch away from that line on both sides of the line and cut on the line. Press the seam allowance open and trim the hourglasses to size. This will make 2 hourglass blocks. We only need 1 hourglass for each wreath, so if you're making the door banner, you'll have a leftover hourglass to use for something else. If you're making a larger quilt, set the extra hourglass aside for the next wreath block. Now we're moving on to the side blocks. We're going to start with 4 at a time flying geese. You need 1 large fabric 1 square and 4 small fabric 2 squares. Mark a line diagonally from corner to corner on the back of each of the small squares. Set 2 of them aside and line up 2 small squares with opposing corners of the large square, aligning the markings. Sew a 1/4 inch away on both sides of the marked line. Cut on the marked line and press the seam allowances toward the small triangles. Take the remaining 2 small squares and line them up with the corners of those units that you just created. And sew a 1/4 inch away on both sides of those marked lines. Cut on the lines and press the seam allowances toward the small triangles again. Now we have 4 flying geese blocks. Trim them to size, making sure to keep the point of the large triangle centered and a 1/4 inch away from the edge of the block. Sew a fabric 1 rectangle to the flying geese blocks to form the side square. Press the seam allowances toward the rectangle, away from the flying geese. This will make 4 side squares. We only need 3 side squares for each wreath, so if you're making the door banner, you'll have an extra that you can use for something else. If you're making a larger quilt, hang on to that 4th side square, and we'll use it in another wreath block. So now we get to assemble our wreaths. Using 1 fabric 5 square, 4 corner squares, 1 hourglass block, and 3 side blocks, lay out the wreath in a 9-patch fashion. We'll sew 3 squares together at a time, forming rows, then press the seam allowances open. Then sew the rows to each other, carefully matching the seams to form the wreath block. Sew the wreath block to the top of the star block to create the center of the door banner. Press the seam allowances open, and now we'll start adding the borders. The first border is made from fabric 5, which is the background fabric, and it's just meant to give a little breathing room to the design. Sew on the top and bottom strips and press the seam allowances toward the borders. Then sew on the side strips. Cut each strip to the correct size and pin in place before sewing for a nice flat border. Repeat with border 2, made from fabric 3. Border 3 is just a little bit different. Add the top and bottom strips as before. Then sew the fabric 3 squares to the ends of the side strips and press before sewing the side strips to the banner. Once everything is pressed, you have a finished quilt top. Choose a backing fabric and quilt as you choose. Before binding, you might want to add a way to hang your door banner. I'm going to attach hanging pockets. To add hanging pockets to the back of your wall hanging, simply cut 2 squares from your binding strip and press them in half diagonally. Pin them to the top corners of the back of your quilt. Sew the binding on over the top of the triangles, and when it's finished, you can insert a dowel into the pockets. Now it's all ready to hang on your front door for a festive, welcoming touch. Thanks for joining me today for this tutorial of the holiday welcome door banner. If you're ready to make your own banner or quilt of any size, you can pick up your pattern at shadowvalleyquilts.com. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.